The day my daughter-in-law laughed while strangers carried my grandmother's old china cabinet out of my living room, I thought I had lost the last piece of my family's history. Rebecca folded her arms and smiled. "It's just an ugly cabinet, Dorothy. You should be thanking me." Then an older gentleman stepped out of a black sedan, glanced at the cabinet only once, and turned to me instead. His expression changed completely. "Mrs. Thompson?" he asked quietly. "Would you tell me who originally owned this cabinet?" In that moment, I realized this story was never about a piece of furniture. Before we go any further, I'd love to ask you something. If this story touches your heart, please take a moment to like and subscribe so we can continue sharing stories that remind us what truly matters. And I'd really love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever owned something that everyone else thought was worthless, but meant the world to you? Also, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I read as many of your comments as I can. I never imagined that at 69 years old, I would have to fight for the right to keep my own memories. When my husband Michael was alive, our home was never quiet. There was always the sound of coffee brewing before sunrise baseball games, playing softly on the television, or him humming old country songs while fixing something in the garage. We weren't wealthy. We never traveled around the world or owned a fancy house. But every corner of our little home in Columbus, Ohio, held a piece of our life together. The china cabinet stood in the dining room from the day we moved in. It wasn't the first thing people noticed when they visited. The paint had faded over the years. One tiny scratch stretched across one of the glass doors. The brass handles had lost their shine long ago. To anyone else, it probably looked like something waiting to be donated. To me, it looked like home. Inside were dishes that my grandmother, Eleanor Brooks, had carefully wrapped in newspaper decades earlier. A crystal bowl Michael bought me for our 25th anniversary sat on the middle shelf. Every Christmas, I displayed the little porcelain angel my son Daniel had painted in elementary school. The cabinet wasn't simply holding objects, it was holding my life. Michael understood that better than anyone. Sometimes he would catch me dusting the cabinet even when it wasn't dirty. He would smile and tease me. "Dorothy, if you polish that thing anymore, it'll think you're trying to marry it." I'd laugh every time. Then he'd walk over, wrap an arm around my shoulders, and whisper something I didn't fully appreciate until years later. "One day, sweetheart, these things won't matter because they're expensive. They'll matter because they're the last witnesses left." After Michael passed away 3 years ago, the silence inside the house became unbearable. For weeks, I couldn't bring myself to sit in his favorite recliner. His reading glasses stayed exactly where he left them. His coffee mug remained in the cabinet. I wasn't pretending he would come back. I simply wasn't ready to erase him. Daniel tried his best after the funeral. He visited every weekend. He fixed little things around the house. He insisted I call him whenever I needed anything. He was a good son. But life kept pulling him away. His engineering firm promoted him. The hours became longer. Weekend visits turned into once every 2 weeks, then once a month. I never blamed him. That's how life works. Children grow up. Parents learn to wait. Everything changed when Daniel and his wife Rebecca sold their townhouse. They told me it would only be temporary. "Mom," Daniel said over dinner one evening, "we'll stay here for maybe 6 months while the new place is being built." I smiled. "Of course, this house is yours too." At first, Rebecca seemed genuinely grateful. She brought flowers. She cooked dinner twice a week. She even insisted on helping me grocery shop. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have such a caring daughter-in-law. But little things started changing. Small things, almost too small to mention. One afternoon, I came home and couldn't find Michael's old radio. Rebecca smiled. "I donated it. It didn't work anyway." A week later, several framed family photographs disappeared from the hallway. They made the house feel cluttered, she explained. Then my old rocking chair vanished from the porch. It looked outdated. Every explanation sounded reasonable if you ignored one important detail. She never asked. She decided. Then she informed me afterward. Each time I told myself it wasn't worth an argument. It's only a radio. It's only a chair. It's only a picture. But every only felt like another page being torn from my life. The china cabinet became Rebecca's next target. I noticed the way she'd stare at it whenever guests visited. One afternoon, her friend Melissa stopped by. Rebecca laughed loudly enough for me to hear from the kitchen. I swear this thing belongs in a museum. Both women laughed. Melissa asked, "Why don't you get rid of it?" Rebecca shrugged. "I'm working on it." I stood behind the kitchen doorway with a dish towel in my hands. She didn't know I had heard every word. That night, I sat alone in front of the cabinet after everyone had gone to bed. I gently traced the carved wooden edge. "I won't let anyone take you," I whispered. The words sounded foolish even to me. It was only furniture. Wasn't it? A few days later, Daniel noticed me looking upset. "You okay, Mom?" I almost told him everything. I almost explained how uncomfortable I felt inside my own home. But he looked exhausted. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. His phone kept buzzing with work messages. Instead, I forced a smile. "I'm fine." He smiled back with relief. "I'm glad." Looking back now, I wish I had spoken. Silence protects no one except the person causing the pain. Rebecca became bolder. She started talking about remodeling the dining room. "This cabinet has to go," she'd say. "It ruins the whole space." Sometimes she'd pull out her phone and show me modern dining rooms from decorating websites. "See clean lines, bright colors, minimal furniture." I'd nod politely. Inside, my heart hurt. One evening, she looked directly at me. "You know Dorothy people hold on to old stuff because they're afraid to move on?" I answered quietly. "Or because they remember the people who left it behind?" She rolled her eyes. "You can't live in the past forever." Maybe she was right. Maybe grief does keep us looking backward. But there is a difference between living in the past and honoring it. I wasn't clinging to wood and glass. I was holding on to voices I could no longer hear. Rebecca never understood that. Or perhaps she never wanted to. A few weeks before everything happened, I found Michael's handwritten grocery list tucked inside one of the cabinet drawers. Milk, bread, coffee, peanut butter. Such ordinary words. I cried for nearly an hour, not because of the list, because I realized no one else in the house would understand why I couldn't throw it away. That evening, I remembered something Michael had told me shortly before he died. He had placed his hand on the china cabinet and smiled. "If someone ever laughs at your memories, Dorothy, remember they're laughing because they've never built memories worth protecting." At the time, I thought he was simply being sentimental. Now those words echoed louder than ever. I just never imagined how soon they would be tested. Long before that cabinet stood in my dining room, it stood in my grandmother Eleanor Brooks' farmhouse, nearly 60 miles outside Columbus. Some of my earliest memories begin there. Every summer, my parents would leave me with Grandma Eleanor while they worked. Her little white farmhouse sat at the end of a gravel road surrounded by maple trees and cornfields. It wasn't fancy, but to a little girl, it felt like the safest place in the world. The first thing I always noticed when I walked through the front door wasn't the smell of fresh bread or the old grandfather clock. It was the china cabinet. Even then, it seemed different from everything else in the house. The wood was darker. The carvings were more detailed. The glass reflected sunlight in a way that made it almost glow during the afternoon. Grandma polished it every Saturday morning. Without fail, she'd hand me a soft cotton cloth. "Easy hands, Dorothy." That was always her first instruction. Wood remembers rough hands. I didn't understand what she meant. I was 8 years old. To me, wood was just wood. Still, I obeyed. She would smile every time I carefully wiped the shelves. "You learn quickly." One afternoon, I asked the obvious question. "Grandma, why do you love this cabinet so much?" She looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Because it has protected our family longer than anyone alive." I laughed. "It can't protect anybody. It's furniture." Instead of correcting me, she simply smiled. "That's what most people would think." At the time, I assumed she was joking. Now I know she wasn't. Grandma had strange rules about that cabinet, rules no one else in the family seemed to notice. Every Thanksgiving, relatives crowded into her dining room. Children ran everywhere. Adults bumped into furniture carrying hot dishes. But if anyone leaned against the cabinet, Grandma immediately spoke up. "Please don't." Always politely, always firmly. If someone tried placing drinks on top of it, she'd move them. If children played too close, she'd gently send them outside. Nobody questioned her. It had simply become part of being at Grandma Eleanor's house. As I grew older, the rules became even stranger. One rainy afternoon, when I was about 12, I found Grandma staring at the back of the cabinet. She looked nervous, almost frightened. "What are you doing?" I asked. She jumped slightly before smiling. "Just checking something." I walked closer. The back panel looked perfectly ordinary. Before I could touch it, she caught my wrist. Her grip surprised me. It was much stronger than I expected from someone in her 70s. "Never remove this panel." Her voice had changed. Gone was the gentle grandmother who baked apple pies. Now she sounded serious. "Promise me." "I promise." She didn't let go immediately. She searched my face as if trying to decide whether I truly understood. Finally, she nodded. "Good." I wanted to ask why, but something in her expression told me not to. A few months later, another strange moment happened. An antique dealer stopped by unexpectedly. He had heard through neighbors that Grandma owned old furniture. He spent nearly an hour looking around the house. When he saw the cabinet, his eyes lit up. "I'd like to buy this." Grandma smiled politely. "It's not for sale." He offered $500. She refused. He raised it to $1,000. She still refused. Finally, he laughed. "Ma'am, this old cabinet isn't worth your stubbornness." Grandma walked him to the front door. Before closing it, she answered calmly, "It isn't the cabinet I'm protecting." The dealer looked confused. So did I. After he left, I asked her again, "What did you mean?" She simply shook her head. Some answers arrived too early. Years passed. I entered high school, then college. Life became busy. I visited less often than I should have. Whenever I came home, Grandma always had the cabinet polished before I arrived. She'd smile. "I knew you'd notice." I always did. One Christmas, she surprised me with an old brass key. It was small enough to fit in my palm. "What does it open?" She smiled mysteriously. "Not today." I turned it over in my fingers. There were no markings, no labels, nothing unusual. "I don't understand." "You don't need to." Then she slipped the key back into her apron pocket. I never saw it again. The last real conversation we had happened just 6 weeks before she died. She looked tired, older than I had ever seen her. We sat together drinking tea in the dining room. Sunlight poured through the window onto the cabinet. She stared at it for a very long time. Then she finally spoke. "Dorothy." "Yes, Grandma." "One day this cabinet will belong to you." I laughed softly. "I hope that's a long time from now." "So do I." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "When that day comes, remember 4 things." I nodded. She raised one finger. "Never repaint it." A second finger. "Never replace the back panel." A third. "Never let strangers repair it." Finally, the fourth. "And never sell it." I frowned. "Why?" She looked toward the cabinet again, then back at me. "Because some things are entrusted, not owned." Those words stayed with me. I wanted to ask another dozen questions. Where had it come from? Who built it? Why was it so important? But Grandma suddenly changed the subject. She asked about school, about Michael, about my plans for the future. The conversation ended. 6 weeks later, she passed away peacefully in her sleep. After the funeral, my mother handed me a small envelope. "Your grandmother left instructions." Inside was a single handwritten note. It simply read, "The cabinet belongs to Dorothy." Nothing else. No explanation. No story. No reason. Only my name. When movers brought the cabinet into Michael's and my first home, he smiled. "So this is the famous cabinet." I nodded. "My grandmother loved it. Do you know why?" "No." He walked around it slowly. "It's beautiful. I've never understood why she protected it." Michael rested his hand gently on the wood. "Maybe you don't have to understand today." "What do you mean? Some family stories take generations before they make sense." He was right. For more than 40 years, I kept every promise I made to Grandma Eleanor. I never repainted it. I never replaced a single piece. I never hired anyone to repair it. And I never sold it. Not because I understood, because I trusted her. Standing in my living room years later, watching strangers prepare to haul it away, one painful thought kept repeating in my mind. I had kept my promise for nearly half a century. Rebecca had broken it in less than 10 minutes. And somehow, I couldn't shake the feeling that Grandma Eleanor had known this day would come. The living room had fallen strangely silent. Rebecca stood beside the front door with her arms crossed, looking proud of herself. The 2 movers had already wrapped my grandmother's china cabinet in thick gray blankets. Only the carved feet were still visible beneath the moving pads. The antique dealer who had bought it glanced at his watch. "I'd really like to get this loaded before traffic," he said. Rebecca smiled. "Go ahead. It's all yours." I stepped forward. "No." My voice surprised even me. It wasn't loud, it was calm. "I never agreed to sell it." Rebecca let out a short laugh. "Oh, Dorothy, please. Daniel and I live here too." "You live with me." Her smile faded for only a second. Then she recovered. "It's just furniture." Before I could answer, another voice interrupted. "Excuse me." Every head turned. An older gentleman had just walked through my open front gate. He wore a navy sport coat despite the summer heat. His silver hair was neatly combed, and a pair of wire-rimmed glasses rested low on his nose. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't even looking at Rebecca. His eyes were fixed on the cabinet. The antique dealer frowned. "Can I help you?" The man nodded politely. "My name is Thomas Whitmore." The dealer's expression changed immediately. "You, Thomas Whitmore." "I heard an interesting cabinet had appeared on the market this morning." Rebecca stepped forward with a bright smile. "If you're here to make a better offer, you're welcome to." Thomas barely acknowledged her. Instead, he slowly walked around the cabinet. He didn't touch it. He simply observed. He crouched slightly near one corner. Then the other. For almost a full minute, no one spoke. Finally, he looked directly at me. "Mrs. Thompson. Dorothy Thompson." He smiled warmly. "Mrs. Thompson, may I ask where this cabinet originally came from?" I swallowed. "It belonged to my grandmother." "What was her name?" "Eleanor Brooks." His eyebrows lifted. "And before her, I don't know." He nodded slowly. "As I suspected." Rebecca sighed dramatically. "Can somebody please explain why everyone's acting like this old thing belongs in the White House?" Thomas ignored the comment. He bent lower and reached beneath the cabinet. His fingertips lightly brushed the carved trim. Then something happened. His entire expression changed. He looked almost surprised. "No." He whispered the word to himself. The antique dealer stepped closer. "What is it?" Thomas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he removed a small flashlight from his jacket pocket. He shined it beneath the cabinet. I watched his eyes carefully follow something hidden in the shadows. Then he stood up. "Who refinished this cabinet?" "No one," I answered. "My grandmother always told me never to repaint it." He looked directly into my eyes. "And you listened?" "Yes." "Good." Rebecca folded her arms. "This is ridiculous." Thomas finally turned toward her. "For you, perhaps." Then he looked back at me. "Mrs. Thompson, may I inspect it more closely?" I nodded. "Of course." He carefully pulled one corner of the moving blanket aside. The rich walnut wood appeared beneath it. Even after all these years, the grain still looked beautiful. Thomas smiled. "Remarkable." Rebecca laughed again. "Seriously?" "It's scratched. It's old. It's outdated." Thomas spoke without looking away from the cabinet. "That's exactly why most people would overlook it." He reached into another pocket and removed a small magnifying glass. The room grew quiet again. Even the movers stopped working. Thomas examined tiny carvings running beneath the lower edge. I had dusted that cabinet thousands of times, yet I had never noticed him studying that particular spot. He leaned closer, then smiled. "There you are." My heart started beating faster. "What did you find?" Instead of answering me, Thomas looked at the antique dealer. "How much did you pay?" The dealer hesitated. $300. Thomas gave a small nod. "I see." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Wait." She suddenly looked excited. "Is it actually valuable?" Thomas remained calm. "I didn't say that." "But you think it is?" "I think it deserves more questions." Rebecca stepped closer. "How much is it worth?" Thomas looked at her for the first time since arriving. "I have no idea." She blinked. "What?" "I never estimate an object before I understand its history." Rebecca looked frustrated. "It's just an antique." Thomas smiled politely. "No, it's a story." Those words made me think of my grandmother. Some things are entrusted, not owned. Thomas turned back toward me. "Mrs. Thompson, did your grandmother ever mention where she acquired this cabinet?" I searched my memory. "She never told me." "Did she ever discuss a craftsman?" "No." "A workshop?" "No." "A family name?" I slowly shook my head. "She always refused to explain." Thomas became thoughtful. Rebecca looked ready to explode. "This is unbelievable." She pointed toward the cabinet. "If it's worth money, just tell us." Thomas answered calmly. "Money is not my first concern." Rebecca laughed sarcastically. "Easy for you to say." He didn't react. Instead, he crouched once more beside the cabinet. This time, he pointed beneath the lower molding. Mrs. Thompson. I stepped closer. Do you see these? I leaned down. For the first time in my life, I noticed 3 tiny marks carved into the wood. They were almost invisible. A small star, a single oak leaf, and what looked like the letter W. I've never seen those before. I believe you. Rebecca looked confused. They're scratches. Thomas shook his head. No, they're maker's marks. The antique dealer suddenly frowned. You think this came from Whitaker's workshop? Thomas stood slowly. I didn't say that. But it's possible. The dealer's face turned pale. Rebecca looked from one man to the other. What does that even mean? Thomas folded his flashlight and returned it to his pocket. If I'm correct? He paused. This cabinet may not be ordinary American furniture. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? It could be connected to one of the rarest cabinet-making families in 19th century America? Rebecca gasped. So it's worth thousands, Thomas answered carefully. Perhaps. Or perhaps much more. Silence filled the room. Even Rebecca stopped smiling. The antique dealer suddenly looked nervous. I think maybe we should review this transaction. Rebecca spun toward him. No. You already paid. He looked uncomfortable. I may have acted too quickly. Thomas nodded. I agree. Rebecca's voice rose. Hold on. You can't change your mind now. Thomas looked directly at the dealer. Did Mrs. Thompson authorize this sale herself? The dealer slowly turned towards me. No? Thomas folded his hands. Then I strongly recommend nothing leaves this house until ownership is clarified. Rebecca's face flushed bright red. This is ridiculous. Thomas calmly replied, No, Mrs. Thompson. This is responsible. He turned back toward me. There is one more question. I nodded. Anything. He looked directly into my eyes. Did your grandmother ever leave behind letters? The question hit me like cold water. Letters. For a split second, I remembered an old envelope I had found years earlier inside a wooden keepsake box. I had never thought much about it. The handwriting had been faded. The names meant nothing to me. I had tucked it away and forgotten it. Thomas noticed my expression immediately. You remembered something. I whispered, I think I did. For a moment, everything around me disappeared. Rebecca was still arguing. The antique dealer kept checking his watch. The movers stood awkwardly beside the wrapped cabinet. But all I could hear were Thomas Whitmore's words. Did your grandmother ever leave behind letters? I stared at the dining room floor. Then I whispered almost to myself. I think she did. Thomas noticed the change in my face immediately. Where are they? I'm not sure. Rebecca threw her hands into the air. Oh, come on. We're seriously delaying this over some old letter. Thomas didn't even acknowledge her. He looked at me with remarkable patience. Mrs. Thompson, don't rush. Think carefully. When was the last time you saw it? I closed my eyes. Pictures began returning one after another. Grandma's funeral. Boxes stacked in my parents' garage. My mother's handwriting. A cedar chest. Then another memory surfaced. Years after Michael and I moved into this house, I had organized old family keepsakes. I found a yellow envelope tucked inside a wooden recipe box. I had opened it, looked at the faded handwriting, failed to understand any of it, then placed it inside another box. I know where it might be. Thomas smiled. Good. Rebecca groaned loudly. This is unbelievable. She looked toward the antique dealer. You're really waiting for this? He hesitated. I think I should. She stared at him. You already bought it. He shifted uncomfortably. Legally, I'm not sure I did. Rebecca's expression hardened. So you're backing out? I'm saying we should slow down. She looked furious. I quietly walked toward the hallway closet. My hands trembled as I reached the top shelf. Several dusty storage boxes sat in the back. Most hadn't been opened in years. I pulled the first one down. Old Christmas decorations. The second, Michael's military records. The third, family photographs. No letter. Thomas remained patient. Take your time. Rebecca checked her phone. I cannot believe we're wasting an afternoon over garbage. I ignored her. Another memory came back. Not the hallway closet, the guest bedroom. I hurried upstairs. Everyone followed behind me. The guest room had slowly become a storage room after Michael died. Shelves lined one wall. Plastic bins filled another. I opened one container after another. Baby clothes, old blankets, birthday cards. Nothing. Rebecca leaned against the doorway. You know you're never going to find it. I kept searching. Thomas quietly walked around the room. He wasn't looking for the letter. He was observing me. Finally, he asked, Mrs. Thompson, when you first found it years ago? What else were you organizing? I stopped. Recipe books. That's it. I had been sorting Grandma Eleanor's cookbooks. I immediately crossed the room toward an old oak bookshelf. On the bottom shelf sat a faded blue recipe binder. Behind it, a small cedar keepsake box. My heart skipped. I remember. I carefully carried it to the bed. The brass latch squeaked as I opened it. Inside were dozens of old papers, recipes, birthday cards, church bulletins, family photographs, and beneath them, a yellow envelope, exactly as I remembered. My hands froze. The handwriting on the front read only 2 words. For Dorothy. Rebecca sighed dramatically. Seriously? Thomas stepped closer. May I? I nodded and handed him the envelope. He examined the paper without opening it. The envelope itself is quite old. He carefully returned it. This should be opened by you. I slowly broke the brittle seal. The paper inside had yellowed with age. Several lines of handwriting covered the page. I began reading silently. Thomas watched my expression. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Well, what does it say? I ignored her. Most of the letter contained ordinary family news. Grandma thanked me for visiting. She hoped Michael and I were happy. She reminded me to plant tomatoes in the spring. Nothing unusual. Then my eyes reached the final paragraph. My breathing stopped. Thomas noticed. What is it? I read aloud. Dorothy. If anyone ever asks about the cabinet, tell them it came from Samuel Whitaker. Thomas closed his eyes, very slowly, almost as though he had been expecting that exact name. Rebecca frowned. Who's Samuel Whitaker? Neither of us answered. The letter continued. Do not speak of the compartment. My hands began shaking. Compartment 1 looked back at Thomas. He looked equally surprised. You've never seen that before. I slowly shook my head. No. The room became perfectly silent. Rebecca finally laughed. This is ridiculous. Every old family writes mysterious letters. Thomas finally spoke. No, they don't. He held out his hand. May I see the letter? I handed it to him. He read every line carefully. Then he folded it exactly as I had. Finally, he looked directly at me. Mrs. Thompson, I believe your grandmother knew exactly what she was protecting. Rebecca crossed her arms. So tell us already. What makes this cabinet special? Thomas spoke carefully. Samuel Whitaker was one of the finest cabinet makers working in the Midwest during the late 1800s. Rebecca shrugged. So, very few verified pieces survive today. She still looked unimpressed. So it could be worth what, 5,000, 10,000? Thomas remained calm. I honestly don't know. Rebecca threw up her hands. You keep saying that. Then what do you know? I know this. He pointed toward the final sentence. Do not speak of the compartment. He looked directly at me. You've owned this cabinet for decades. Have you ever found one? I answered honestly. No. I didn't even know one existed. Thomas nodded. I believe you. The antique dealer suddenly spoke. If there's really a hidden compartment, Thomas interrupted gently. We do not force antique furniture open. Rebecca laughed again. Oh, please. It's just wood. Thomas looked at her. No. It's history. She folded her arms tighter. So what now? Thomas turned toward me. Mrs. Thompson? I'd like permission to inspect the cabinet. Only inspect. I won't damage anything. I didn't hesitate. You have it. Rebecca immediately objected. Hold on. You can't just start taking it apart. Thomas smiled politely. I have no intention of taking it apart. I simply want to understand how it was built. He walked downstairs toward the dining room. We followed him. The cabinet still stood exactly where the movers had left it. Thomas slowly removed the protective blankets. His hands moved carefully across every carved edge. He measured distances with a small folding ruler, tapped gently on different wooden panels, listened, moved again. Then he suddenly stopped. His fingertips rested on the lower back corner. He looked at me. Mrs. Thompson, I think your grandmother wasn't protecting the cabinet. He paused, then smiled. I think she was protecting what has been hidden inside it for more than 100 years. Rebecca's confident smile finally disappeared. For the first time since all this began, she looked nervous. No one spoke. Thomas Whitmore slowly circled the china cabinet one more time. His fingertips moved across the wood with incredible care, almost as if he were greeting an old friend. Every few seconds, he stopped, lightly tapped a panel with one knuckle, then listened. Tap, pause, tap, pause. Rebecca sighed loudly. How long is this going to take? Thomas didn't answer. He crouched behind the cabinet and shined his flashlight along the back panel. The beam revealed nothing unusual to me. Just old walnut boards, tiny nails, a century of dust. Thomas smiled to himself. I was hoping for this. I frowned. What did you find? He motioned for me to come closer. Look right here. I knelt beside him. He pointed toward the bottom edge of the back panel. At first, I saw nothing. Then I noticed it. The grain of one narrow strip of wood ran in the opposite direction from every other board. It was almost impossible to see unless someone pointed it out. I've never noticed that. I'm not surprised. Rebecca folded her arms. I still don't see anything. Thomas stood up. Most people wouldn't. He looked at me. Mrs. Thompson, your grandmother told you never to replace the back panel. Yes. Now, you know why. I swallowed. Is that the compartment? He shook his head. No. I believe it's the entrance. A chill ran through my body. Rebecca laughed. So there's a secret treasure hiding inside. Thomas calmly answered. I didn't say treasure. She smirked. Then what's the big deal? He looked directly at her. History is often worth more than treasure. Rebecca rolled her eyes. I'll believe it when I see it. Thomas ignored her again. He removed a small leather case from his briefcase. Inside were tiny inspection mirrors, cotton gloves, and several delicate tools. The antique dealer stared. I've seen museum conservators use those. Thomas nodded. I've worked with many. Rebecca immediately stepped forward. So, open it. Thomas closed the case again. No. She blinked. What? I'm not opening anything. Why not? Because I don't own it. He looked at me. And neither do you. Rebecca's face turned red. I live here. Thomas answered gently. Living in someone's home and owning their heirloom are not the same thing. She looked ready to argue again. Instead, she turned toward me. Dorothy, if this thing is valuable, we should find out now. I looked at her. Only an hour earlier, she had called it ugly. Now she couldn't stop talking about it. Thomas seemed to notice the same thing. He spoke quietly. Value has a way of changing people's priorities. No one answered. He continued examining the cabinet. This time, he measured the distance between several carved panels. Then he nodded slowly. It fits. I asked, what fits? He smiled. A pattern. He pointed toward the carved oak leaves running along the bottom edge. There are 23 leaves. I counted silently. He was right. 23. So, Rebecca asked. Thomas continued. Now count the leaves on the opposite side. I walked around the cabinet. 22. I frowned. One is missing. Exactly. Rebecca shrugged. Maybe it broke off. Thomas smiled. No. It was never there. My curiosity grew stronger. What does that mean? He reached toward the empty space but stopped before touching it. Master cabinet makers often hid release mechanisms inside decorative carvings. Rebecca laughed. You've got to be kidding! Thomas looked completely serious. I'm not. The antique dealer leaned closer. I've heard stories. Thomas nodded. Most are exaggerated. But not all. Rebecca suddenly reached toward the cabinet. Well, let's push it. Thomas caught her wrist before she touched the wood. His movement was calm, but firm. Please don't. She yanked her hand away. I was only touching it. And that's exactly why I asked you not to. She looked offended. Seriously? He took a slow breath. If there is a hidden mechanism forcing, it could permanently damage it. Rebecca shook her head. So, we're supposed to stare at it forever. Thomas smiled politely. No. We're supposed to respect it. I couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken about my grandmother's cabinet with such care. For years I had felt foolish protecting it. Now, for the first time in my life, someone else understood. Thomas suddenly looked at me. Mrs. Thompson? May I ask another question? Of course. Did your grandmother ever own unusual tools? I thought for a moment. No. Special keys. The word hit me instantly. Keys. The brass key. I gasped. There was a key. Thomas's eyes widened. What kind? Small. Brass. My grandmother showed it to me once. Do you still have it? My excitement disappeared. I don't know. I never inherited it. Thomas became thoughtful. Interesting. Rebecca threw up her hands. Now we're looking for imaginary keys. Thomas ignored her. He looked back at me. Did your grandmother say what it opened? I shook my head. She only said... I paused. What? Not today. Thomas smiled. That sounds exactly like someone protecting a family secret. The antique dealer looked increasingly uncomfortable. I think this cabinet is staying here. Rebecca turned toward him. You can't just decide that, he answered honestly. I don't want to be involved in a legal dispute. She crossed her arms. I already spent the money. The room fell silent. Thomas slowly turned toward her. You spent it already? Rebecca hesitated. It doesn't matter. Thomas said nothing, but I noticed something change in his expression. For the first time, he wasn't merely curious about the cabinet. He was beginning to study Rebecca, as if trying to understand her motives. I quietly asked, What happens now? Thomas answered immediately. I recommend no one attempts to open this cabinet. Rebecca groaned. Again with the waiting. Thomas nodded. Yes. Because patience preserved it for more than a century. He pointed toward the back panel. If someone had forced this open years ago, whatever remains inside could have been destroyed. His words settled heavily over the room. Destroyed. The thought hurt. Grandma Eleanor had protected this cabinet for decades. Michael had respected it without ever asking questions, and Rebecca had nearly sold it in a single afternoon. Thomas packed away his tools. I'll need one more thing. What? Time. Rebecca laughed bitterly. Wonderful. Thomas ignored the sarcasm. I'd like to consult several historical records. Rebecca frowned. You mean you're leaving for now? She looked relieved. Good. I have errands. Thomas looked directly at me before closing his briefcase. Mrs. Thompson? I believe your grandmother expected someone to come looking one day. My heart skipped. You really think so? He nodded. Otherwise, she would never have written Samuel Whitaker's name. He paused. That wasn't a coincidence. As he turned toward the front door, I noticed him stop beside the cabinet one last time. He gently rested one hand against the wood, almost like saying goodbye. Then he whispered something so softly that only I heard it. I hope we aren't too late. Those 6 words echoed inside my mind long after he left. Because if Thomas Whitmore, the man who knew more about antiques than anyone I'd ever met, was worried about being too late, then whatever had been hidden inside my grandmother's cabinet had to be far more important than any of us had imagined. And somehow, I had the uneasy feeling someone else might already be searching for it. Thomas had barely driven away when the front door slammed. Rebecca spun toward me. I hope you're happy. I looked at her quietly. I didn't ask for any of this. She laughed without humor. Oh, yes, you did. You invited that man into my house. Our house? I corrected. Her eyes narrowed. No, Dorothy. Daniel and I live here too. Before I could answer, the antique dealer cleared his throat. I'll void today's transaction. Rebecca turned sharply. You can't. I already processed the payment. He pulled a folded receipt from his pocket. I'll cancel it. And I'll notify my office that the cabinet isn't leaving. Rebecca stepped closer until they were almost face to face. You don't get to change your mind because some collector showed up. The dealer remained calm. I'd rather lose a sale than end up in court. He handed me the receipt. Tear it up if you'd like. I folded it and slipped it into my pocket. Thank you. After he left, the movers loaded their blankets back into the truck and drove away. The china cabinet remained exactly where it had stood for decades. Only now it felt different. As though everyone in the room finally understood it wasn't ordinary furniture. Rebecca didn't. She marched into the kitchen, grabbed her phone, and began pacing. I can't believe this. I cannot believe this. I wasn't trying to listen, but the house was quiet. Her voice carried easily. Yes. He backed out. No, some old collector interfered? I don't know. He says it might be worth something. She paused. My attention sharpened. No, he didn't tell us how much. Another pause. Then she lowered her voice. I know. I'll figure something out. The call ended. I pretended I hadn't heard anything. But one sentence stayed with me. I'll figure something out. That didn't sound like someone who had simply made a mistake. It sounded like someone who already had plans for the money. About 30 minutes later, my phone rang. Daniel. I answered immediately. Hi, sweetheart. Hey, Mom. His voice sounded tired. I'm finally leaving Indianapolis. I should be home around 8. I smiled. I'll make dinner. There was a brief silence. Then he laughed softly. You always say that. It's what mothers do. His laugh faded. Everything okay? For just a second, I almost told him. I almost explained everything. The sale, Thomas Whitmore, the hidden compartment, Rebecca. Instead, I looked toward the dining room. The cabinet stood exactly where it always had. Waiting. No, I finally said. Everything isn't okay. Daniel immediately became serious. What happened? I took a slow breath. It's better if I tell you when you get home. His voice tightened. Mom, you're worrying me. I know. But this needs to happen face to face. Does it involve Rebecca? That surprised me. Why would you ask that? He hesitated. We've been arguing lately. My heart sank. About what? Money. I closed my eyes. Money. Of course. We'll talk tonight. After hanging up, I walked into the dining room. The afternoon sunlight shined through the cabinet glass exactly as it had when my grandmother owned it. I rested my hand gently on the wood. I almost failed you. For years, I believed my promise to Grandma Eleanor was simple. Don't sell it. Now I realized the promise had been much bigger. Protect it. I wasn't alone for long. Emily Carter knocked softly before letting herself inside. I saw the moving truck. She looked around, then smiled. They didn't take it. No. I hugged her tightly. She stepped back. Now tell me everything. So I did. Every word. Rebecca selling the cabinet, Thomas arriving, the letter, Samuel Whitaker, the hidden compartment. Emily listened without interrupting. When I finished, she slowly sat down. I've known you since 2nd grade. Yes. I've seen that cabinet in your house for 40 years. I know. She shook her head. And somehow, neither of us ever guessed. I laughed quietly. Apparently not. She looked toward the cabinet. Do you think Thomas is right? I don't know, but I trust him. Emily nodded. So do I. She leaned closer. But Dorothy, what? Something about Rebecca bothers me. It bothers me too. No. I mean today. The way she reacted. I thought back. At first, Rebecca mocked the cabinet. Then she became excited, then angry, then desperate. Emily quietly said, People don't panic unless they have something to lose. Those words stayed with me. Around 6 that evening, Rebecca came downstairs dressed to go out. She grabbed her purse. I'm meeting a friend. I looked up from the kitchen table. Daniel will be home soon. So, I'd think you'd want to be here. She shrugged. We can talk later. She started toward the front door, then stopped, turned around, and looked directly at the cabinet. Not casually, carefully, as if memorizing it, as if trying to solve a puzzle. I noticed. She noticed me noticing. Without saying another word, she walked outside. Emily waited until Rebecca's car disappeared, then quietly asked, "Did you see that?" "Yes." She wasn't looking at the cabinet. I frowned. "What do you mean?" Emily answered. "She was looking for something." A chill ran through me. For the next hour, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Thomas believed there was a hidden compartment. Grandma Eleanor had warned me never to let strangers repair it. The letter specifically mentioned Samuel Whitaker. And Rebecca suddenly couldn't stop staring at the cabinet. What if she believed Thomas? What if she decided not to wait? At exactly 7:48 p.m., headlights swept across the living room window. Daniel was home. I walked to the front door before he even reached it. The moment he stepped inside, he smiled. "Hi, Mom." Then he saw my face. His smile disappeared. "What happened?" Before I could answer, another sound came from outside. A car door, then footsteps. Rebecca wasn't alone. She had come back, and she had brought someone with her. Daniel looked from me to the front door. "Mom, who else is here?" Before I could answer, Rebecca walked in. She wasn't smiling anymore. Behind her stood a man carrying a black toolbox. He looked to be in his late 50s, wearing a faded work shirt with the words, "Frank's Furniture Repair," stitched over the pocket. The moment Thomas's warning echoed in my mind. Never let strangers repair it. Every muscle in my body tightened. Rebecca spoke first. "Daniel, perfect timing." She pointed toward the china cabinet. "I found someone who can open the hidden compartment." The room went silent. Daniel blinked. "What hidden compartment?" Rebecca looked surprised. "You don't know?" "No?" She looked at me. "You didn't tell him?" "I was waiting until he got home." Daniel set his overnight bag on the floor. "Somebody explain what's happening." I took a slow breath. "I will." I started from the beginning. I told him about coming home to find strangers carrying away the cabinet. I explained that Rebecca had sold it without asking me. His eyes immediately shifted toward his wife. "You sold it," Rebecca answered quickly. "I was helping." "You never told me." "I didn't think it mattered." "It mattered to Mom." She crossed her arms. "It's furniture." I continued speaking before another argument could begin. I explained Thomas Whitmore's visit, the carved symbols, Samuel Whitaker, Grandma Eleanor's letter, the hidden compartment. By the time I finished, Daniel looked overwhelmed. He slowly sat down. "So..." He rubbed his forehead. "Let me make sure I understand." He pointed toward the cabinet. "Some antique expert believes there's something hidden inside. Thomas thinks so, and Rebecca hired someone to force it open." "I wasn't going to force anything," Frank interrupted. Everyone looked at him. He raised both hands. "I only came because the lady said there was an antique cabinet with a stuck panel." Rebecca quickly added, "See, I wasn't doing anything wrong." Frank walked toward the cabinet. He studied it quietly for several seconds. Then he frowned. "Who built this?" "I don't know," I answered. He slowly ran one finger a few inches above the wood without touching it. "I've restored furniture for 30 years. I've never seen joinery like this." Rebecca smiled. "So you can open it?" Frank immediately shook his head. "No." Her smile disappeared. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean absolutely not." He stepped backward. "This cabinet needs a museum conservator." Rebecca stared at him. "I hired you." You hired me to repair furniture. This isn't furniture anymore. Daniel looked confused. What changed? Frank pointed toward the back panel. See those nails? We all leaned closer. They're hand-forged. He pointed again. And these joints? They were cut by hand. Then he looked at me. Ma'am, if someone opens this the wrong way, you could destroy something that has survived over 100 years. Rebecca sighed loudly. Not you too. Frank ignored her. I won't touch it. She looked angry. I'll still pay you. He shook his head again. I don't want the money. I don't want the responsibility. He packed his tools without removing a single one. As he reached the front door, he stopped beside me. He lowered his voice. If Thomas Whitmore came here personally, you should listen to him. Then he left. Rebecca slammed the door behind him. This is insane. Daniel slowly stood. No. He looked directly at her. What's insane is selling Mom's property without asking. She froze. So, you're taking her side. I'm taking the truth side. You always do this. No. I usually avoid arguments. His voice remained calm. But not tonight. I had rarely seen my son speak that firmly. Rebecca noticed it too. She softened her tone. Daniel, I only wanted to modernize the house. You sold Mom's cabinet. It was ugly. It wasn't yours. Silence filled the room. Rebecca looked toward me. Dorothy, you've known me for years. You know I wasn't trying to hurt you. I answered honestly. I don't know that anymore. For a moment, her confidence cracked. Then she straightened again. Fine. If nobody else is willing to find out what's inside, I will. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? It means I'm tired of waiting. She walked toward the cabinet. Before she reached it, Daniel stepped in front of her. No. She stared at him. Move. I'm not moving. You can't stop me. I can. She looked around the room. Unbelievable. Then she grabbed her purse. I'm staying at Melissa's tonight. Daniel didn't answer. She stopped at the doorway. You'll regret this. Then she walked out. The front door slammed hard enough to shake the picture frames. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Finally, Daniel looked at me. I'm sorry. You don't owe me an apology. I should have noticed. I placed my hand on his shoulder. You've been working. I've been making excuses. He looked toward the cabinet. I don't even recognize her anymore. Neither did I. Emily, who had quietly watched everything unfold, finally spoke. Dorothy. I turned toward her. Rebecca wasn't interested in antiques. No. She wasn't interested in family history. No. Emily folded her arms. So why is she suddenly obsessed with opening that cabinet? Nobody answered, because we all knew the same thing. It wasn't curiosity, it was greed. Daniel slowly walked around the cabinet. I grew up with this thing. He smiled sadly. I used to hide behind it during hide and seek. I laughed softly. You always forgot your feet were sticking out. He laughed too. For the first time that evening, the tension eased. Then his smile faded. Mom, what if Thomas is right? I don't know. What if Grandma really hid something inside? I looked at the old cabinet. I've waited nearly 50 years. I can wait a little longer. Daniel nodded. So can I. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated. One new text message. Unknown number. I opened it. My blood ran cold. The message contained only one sentence. Don't let anyone open the cabinet until I return. Someone has already started looking for what's inside. There was no signature. But somehow, I knew exactly who had sent it. Thomas Whitmore. I read Thomas Whitmore's message 3 more times. Don't let anyone open the cabinet until I return. Someone has already started looking for what's inside. I showed the text to Daniel. He frowned. What does he mean? Someone… I don't know. Emily looked toward the front window. Maybe Rebecca. I wanted to disagree. I couldn't. Rebecca had gone from mocking the cabinet to trying to hire someone to open it in less than 24 hours. That wasn't curiosity, that was urgency. Daniel locked the front door. Then he checked every window. I smiled weakly. You think someone is coming tonight? I don't know. But if Mr. Whitmore sent that message, I'm not taking chances. For the first time in years, I saw my son acting like the protector instead of the peacemaker. It reminded me of Michael. Around 9 o'clock, Emily finally headed home. She hugged me before leaving. Call me if anything happens. I will. And Dorothy? Yes. Don't ignore your instincts. After she left, Daniel made coffee. Neither of us was ready to sleep. The cabinet stood quietly in the dining room. Every few minutes, one of us looked toward it. Neither of us admitted we were doing it. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. If this cabinet turns out to be worth a fortune. He hesitated. What will you do? I looked at him. I honestly don't know. You wouldn't sell it. I've protected it for almost 50 years. I don't think money could suddenly make me forget that. He nodded slowly. I understand. Then he surprised me. I wouldn't sell it either. I smiled. Your grandmother Eleanor would like hearing that. He laughed softly. I wish I'd known her better. So do I. Around 10:30, Daniel went upstairs to shower. I stayed behind. The house had become completely silent. I walked over to the cabinet. Moonlight reflected softly through the old glass. I rested my hand against the wood. I wish you could tell me your story. For just a moment, I almost imagined my grandmother standing beside me, smiling, waiting. Then a sound, very faint, outside. Gravel crunching beneath someone's shoes. I froze. The sound stopped. Then came another, closer this time. Someone was walking around the side of the house. My heart immediately began pounding. Daniel. I tried calling quietly. No answer. The shower was running upstairs. The footsteps continued. Slow. Careful. Not someone walking toward the front door. Someone trying not to be heard. I reached for my phone. Before I could dial, a flashlight beam swept across the dining room window. Just for a second. Then disappeared. Every hair on my arm stood up. I whispered, "Someone's outside." I hurried upstairs. Daniel opened the bathroom door the moment he heard my voice. What happened? I think someone's in the backyard. He didn't hesitate. He grabbed a flashlight from the hallway closet and headed downstairs. Stay behind me. We switched off every light inside the house. From the dark living room, we carefully looked outside. Nothing. The yard appeared empty. The maple tree swayed gently in the summer breeze. Then, the flashlight beam appeared again, near the garage. Daniel whispered, I saw it. So did I. He unlocked the back door. I'm going outside. I grabbed his arm. No. What if someone's trying to break in? What if they want you to go outside? He stopped. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then another sound echoed across the backyard. A car door closing, engine starting. Headlights flashed briefly through the trees. Whoever had been there was leaving. Daniel hurried outside anyway. I followed, despite his protests. The yard looked perfectly normal, until he pointed toward the dining room window. "Mom?" There beneath the flower box lay fresh footprints in the damp soil. Large. Definitely not mine. Definitely not Daniel's. Someone had stood directly beneath the window, looking inside. Daniel slowly walked toward them. They came right up to the glass. I looked toward the cabinet. It was perfectly visible from that exact spot. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. They weren't watching us. They were watching the cabinet. Daniel took several pictures of the footprints with his phone. Then he noticed something else. A folded piece of paper caught beneath one of the porch chairs. He picked it up. "What is this?" There was no envelope. Just one sheet folded in half. Inside, written in neat black ink, were 7 words. "Some family secrets are worth dying for." Nothing else. No name, no signature. Daniel stared at the note. "This isn't funny." "No, it isn't." He immediately called the local police. 2 officers arrived about 20 minutes later. Officer Ramirez carefully examined the footprints. His partner photographed the note. "Has anyone threatened you before?" I shook my head. "Never." Daniel explained everything. Not every detail. Just enough. The antique cabinet, the attempted sale, the collector, the strange message. Officer Ramirez listened carefully. Finally, he said, "It could be teenagers." Daniel handed him Thomas's text message. The officer read it twice. His expression changed. "Or..." He folded the phone shut. "Someone believes there's something valuable inside." That answer didn't make me feel any better. Before leaving, the officers advised us to keep the doors locked and call immediately if anyone returned. Daniel installed 2 old security cameras the very same night. Around 1 in the morning, exhaustion finally caught up with us. As I climbed into bed, I couldn't stop replaying one question. Who had stood outside my dining room window? Rebecca? Someone Thomas knew? Another collector? Or someone connected to Samuel Whitaker? I didn't know. But one thing had become painfully clear. The mystery hidden inside my grandmother's cabinet was no longer just a family secret. Someone else wanted it badly enough to come searching in the middle of the night. I didn't sleep more than an hour that night. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every passing car made me wonder if someone had come back. By sunrise, Daniel was already awake. He stood in the kitchen, staring through the window toward the dining room. The cabinet. It seemed strange that one piece of furniture could change the atmosphere of an entire house. Just 2 days earlier, it had been part of the background. Now, it felt like the center of everything. Daniel poured 2 cups of coffee. "I've been thinking." "So have I." He sat across from me. "I don't want you staying here alone." I smiled. "I've lived here for 42 years. "I know. But now someone knows there's something hidden in this house." He wasn't wrong. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Thomas Whitmore. I answered immediately. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm glad you picked up." His voice sounded tired. "I drove to Cincinnati before sunrise." "Cincinnati?" "I needed to meet someone." "What did you find?" There was a brief pause. "I found confirmation." My heart skipped. "Confirmation of what? Samuel Whitaker." I gripped the phone tighter. "So he was real?" "Oh, very real. And much more important than I first believed." Daniel leaned closer, trying to hear. Thomas continued. I've located a 19th century workshop ledger. It mentions a commission that matches your cabinet almost exactly. I looked toward the dining room. What does that mean? It means your grandmother's letter was authentic. And I also learned something else. His voice became quieter. The cabinet wasn't built for display. It was built for concealment. A chill ran through me. So there really is a compartment. I'm now almost certain. Daniel whispered. Put him on speaker. I did. Thomas continued. But that's not the most important discovery. Neither of us spoke. The ledger mentions a package. Daniel frowned. What kind of package? I don't know. The record stopped there, but one sentence caught my attention. What did it say? Thomas slowly read from his notes. Delivered directly into the keeping cabinet, never to be removed except by family. The room fell silent. Family. Grandma Eleanor had always said the cabinet protected the family. Maybe she hadn't been speaking figuratively. Daniel asked, Did it mention money? No. Jewelry? No. Gold? No. Thomas sighed. If I had to guess, I believe whatever was hidden inside had historical value. I remembered Rebecca's words. How much is it worth? Thomas had never asked that question. Rebecca had asked it repeatedly. That difference suddenly seemed enormous. Thomas interrupted my thoughts. Mrs. Thompson? Yes. I need another day. For what? I'm meeting an archivist. He specializes in Whitaker's records. Do you think he'll know what's inside? I don't know, but I believe he'll know how to open it safely. Daniel nodded. Take all the time you need. Thomas hesitated. There's one more thing. My stomach tightened. Go ahead. I don't think the person who came to your house last night was random. Daniel and I exchanged glances. Why? Because another cabinet disappeared. I felt my breath catch. What? About 6 months ago. Very similar construction. Different family. Different state. What happened? It was stolen. Neither Daniel nor I spoke. The compartment had already been forced open when police recovered it. Were they able to find what was inside? Thomas answered quietly. No. Whatever had been hidden was gone. After we ended the call, neither Daniel nor I moved for nearly a minute. Finally, he whispered, So somebody has been looking for these cabinets. It sounds that way. Before either of us could say more, another car pulled into the driveway. Rebecca. She climbed out carrying an overnight bag. Daniel looked surprised. I thought she was staying with Melissa? So did I. Rebecca walked inside without saying good morning. She looked exhausted. Dark circles framed her eyes. She placed her purse on the counter. I want to talk. Daniel folded his arms. So do I. She looked at me first. Dorothy. I'm sorry. The apology came so suddenly that I almost believed it. Almost. She continued. I shouldn't have sold the cabinet. No, you shouldn't have. She nodded. I know. Daniel studied her carefully. What changed? She hesitated, then answered, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything. For a moment I saw the woman I thought I had known. Then she ruined it. If the cabinet really is valuable, we should handle this together. There it was. Not concern, not guilt, value, money. Daniel noticed it too. He sighed. Rebecca? Is that what this is about? No, it isn't. Then if Thomas says the cabinet shouldn't be touched, why are you still talking about its value? She looked frustrated. I'm being practical. No, he answered calmly. You're being greedy. Her face hardened. So, that's what you think of me? I'm judging your actions. She laughed bitterly. You always take your mother's side. He shook his head. I've spent years avoiding conflict. I'm done doing that. Rebecca stared at him for several seconds, then quietly asked, if there's something worth millions hidden inside? Wouldn't you want to know? Daniel answered without hesitation. I'd rather protect Mom than chase money. I watched Rebecca's face carefully. For just an instant, I saw disappointment, not relief, not happiness. Disappointment, as though Daniel had just become an obstacle. That frightened me more than anything else, because for the first time, I realized Rebecca might not simply be impatient. She might already know more about that cabinet than she had ever admitted. And if that was true, then the stranger outside my window hadn't been searching blindly. Someone, somewhere, already knew exactly what they were looking for. Rebecca left that afternoon without another word. The front door closed quietly behind her this time. No shouting, no dramatic exit. Somehow that silence unsettled me more. Daniel watched through the front window until her car disappeared. I don't think she's giving up. Neither do I. He turned toward me. Mom, there's something I haven't told you. I looked at him. What is it? He sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Rebecca has been acting strangely for months. What do you mean? I thought it was just stress. He rubbed both hands across his face. But now, I'm not so sure. I waited. About 3 months ago, she started asking me questions. What kind of questions? About your grandmother, I frowned. She barely knew Grandma Eleanor. I know. That's why I thought it was odd. What did she ask? Daniel tried to remember. She wanted to know whether Grandma had left you anything besides the cabinet? I stared at him. What did you tell her? The truth? That, as far as I knew, she only left you the cabinet. He paused. Then she asked whether Grandma had ever mentioned hidden compartments. The room suddenly felt colder. Daniel? Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think it mattered. He looked genuinely ashamed. I thought she was just making conversation. I slowly shook my head. No. She was looking for something. Daniel nodded. I can see that now. Before either of us could say more, my phone rang again. Thomas Whitmore. I answered immediately. Mr. Whitmore? I've just finished meeting with the archivist. His voice sounded more excited than before. And we found another document. My pulse quickened. What kind of document? A shipping receipt. For your cabinet? I believe so. Daniel moved closer. Thomas continued. The receipt lists the buyer. I held my breath. Who was it? It wasn't your grandmother. It wasn't Samuel Whitaker. It was a man named Henry Brooks. My great-grandfather. Exactly. I looked at Daniel. Neither of us spoke. Thomas continued. Henry Brooks purchased the cabinet directly from Whitaker's workshop, so it stayed in our family from the beginning. Yes? But there's something even more interesting. I gripped the phone tighter. What? The receipt includes a handwritten note. What does it say? Thomas read slowly. Cabinet delivered complete, archive secured, access entrusted to family matriarch only. I repeated the last 4 words. Family matriarch. Yes. What does that mean? I believe each generation selected one woman to protect whatever was hidden inside. I closed my eyes. Grandma Eleanor, then me. Suddenly, everything made sense. Why she had spoken only to me. Why she left the cabinet specifically to me. Why she never explained it to anyone else. Daniel whispered, "Mom, Grandma chose you." Tears filled my eyes. I never realized. Thomas continued. "Mrs. Thompson? I have one question. Anything. Did your mother ever mention refusing the cabinet?" I thought carefully. Then another memory surfaced. After Grandma Eleanor's funeral, my mother had smiled when she handed me the note. She had said something that never made sense at the time. "Your grandmother insisted it belonged with you. Not me. Not your father. Only you." I slowly answered, "Yes." Thomas let out a long breath. "Then my theory is becoming stronger." "What theory?" "Your grandmother believed you were the next guardian." Not owner, guardian. That single word carried enormous weight. Daniel looked at me. "You've been protecting it all these years without even knowing why?" "I guess I have." Thomas lowered his voice. "I'll be there tomorrow morning." "Can you open it?" "If everything I've learned is correct." "I think I finally know how." After the call ended, Daniel stood quietly for several moments. Finally, he smiled. "You know what Dad would say." I laughed softly through my tears. "Well, sweetheart, looks like your grandmother knew what she was doing." Daniel laughed too. He absolutely would. Our moment didn't last long. The security camera mounted above the garage chimed. Motion detected. Daniel immediately grabbed his phone. The live video appeared. A silver SUV had slowed in front of the house. It didn't stop. It simply rolled past. Very slowly. The driver turned his head toward our dining room window, then continued driving. Neither of us recognized the vehicle. But 10 minutes later, it came back. Again, it slowed. Again, the driver looked toward the cabinet, then drove away. Daniel zoomed in on the video. The license plate was too blurry to read. "That's not normal." "No, it isn't." He immediately saved the footage. For the next hour, we watched the cameras. No one returned. But just after sunset, another notification appeared. This time, it wasn't a vehicle. It was a person. Someone wearing a baseball cap had walked onto the sidewalk across the street. He stood there for almost 30 seconds, looking directly at our house. Then he pulled out his phone, took a photograph, and walked away. Daniel's expression hardened. "They're watching." I whispered, "Who are they?" Neither of us had an answer. But one thing had become painfully obvious. Whatever had been hidden inside my grandmother's cabinet, people were no longer waiting for us to find it. They were preparing to take it first. The next morning felt different, not because the fear had disappeared, because the waiting was finally over. At exactly 9 o'clock, Thomas Whitmore pulled into the driveway. He wasn't alone. An elderly woman stepped out of the passenger seat carrying a long wooden case. She looked to be in her 70s, with silver hair tied neatly behind her head. Thomas introduced her immediately. "Dorothy, this is Margaret Ellis." She smiled warmly. "I spent 35 years conserving furniture for the National Museum." I shook her hand. "Thank you for coming." She looked toward the dining room. "The cabinet deserves it." Those words reminded me of Grandma Eleanor. Not that it was valuable, that it deserved respect. Daniel invited them inside. Neither Thomas nor Margaret walked directly to the cabinet. Instead, they stood several feet away and simply observed it. They examined the carvings. the proportions, the wear along the base. Finally, Margaret spoke. "It's exactly as described." Thomas nodded. "So you see it too?" "I do." Daniel looked confused. "See what?" Margaret pointed toward the carved oak leaves. "The pattern." Thomas looked at me. "Mrs. Thompson, do you remember the missing leaf I showed you?" "I do." Margaret smiled. "That wasn't decoration. It was an instruction." She carefully opened the wooden case. Inside were several small tools wrapped in soft cloth. None looked sharp. None looked capable of forcing anything open. Daniel frowned. "Those don't look like repair tools." "They aren't," Margaret answered gently. "They're conservation tools." She put on white cotton gloves. Then she asked me a question. "Dorothy, may I have your permission to examine your grandmother's cabinet?" I looked at the old walnut wood. I remembered Grandma Eleanor, Michael, every promise I had ever made. Then I nodded. "Yes. But please, don't hurt it." Margaret smiled. "I promise." The room became completely silent. She didn't touch the back panel. She didn't touch the glass doors. Instead, she knelt beside the missing carved leaf. Using nothing more than a thin strip of polished bone, she gently pressed inside the empty space. Nothing happened. She tried again. A little higher. Still nothing. Thomas checked his notes. "Try the lower edge." She adjusted slightly. A faint sound echoed through the dining room. Click. Everyone froze. Daniel whispered, "Did you hear that?" I did. Margaret slowly stood. "The first lock released." My heart began pounding. "The first?" Thomas nodded. Master craftsmen rarely trusted only one mechanism. Margaret walked to the opposite side of the cabinet. She counted the carved leaves with her finger. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 22. Then she gently pressed beneath the last leaf. Another soft click. This time, the cabinet seemed to settle slightly, barely enough to notice. Thomas smiled. "Perfect." Margaret looked at me. "Now comes the important part." She carefully reached behind the cabinet, not toward the back panel, toward the lower frame beneath it. She slid her fingers along the wood, then stopped. "I found it." She slowly pulled. Nothing happened. Instead, the entire cabinet seemed to breathe. A hidden seam appeared between two boards that had looked perfectly solid only seconds earlier. Daniel gasped. "I've never seen that before." Neither had I. Margaret gently opened the narrow panel. No cracking, no splintering, just perfect craftsmanship, as if it had been built yesterday instead of more than a century ago. Inside, darkness. Thomas switched on a small inspection light. He didn't reach inside. Neither did Margaret. Both simply looked. Then they exchanged a glance. Thomas smiled. "It's still there." Tears instantly filled my eyes. He looked at me. "Mrs. Thompson?" "I believe your grandmother succeeded." Margaret finally reached into the hidden compartment with extraordinary care. She removed the first object, a leather-bound journal. Its cover was cracked with age, but beautifully preserved. Then another, and another. 5 journals in total. Next came a bundle of letters tied together with faded blue ribbon. Then several folded drawings. Finally, a flat wooden box no larger than a family Bible. She placed everything carefully on a white cloth spread across my dining table. No one spoke. I could barely breathe. Thomas picked up the top journal. The first page contained elegant handwriting. Not my grandmother's, not Henry Brooks, someone much older. At the top were only 6 words. The Whitaker family preservation record. Thomas looked at me with unmistakable excitement. Dorothy, you aren't looking at hidden money. You aren't looking at jewels. What you have here, he carefully opened another page, is a complete historical archive. Daniel stared at the journals. So that's what Grandma protected. Thomas nodded. For generations. Margaret untied the blue ribbon surrounding the letters. She stopped after reading only the first line. Oh my. Thomas immediately looked over. What? She handed him the letter. He read silently. His eyes widened. I can't believe this. What is it? He looked at me. The signature. My voice barely worked. Whose signature? He slowly turned the page toward me. At the bottom, written in dark brown ink, was one name, Samuel Whitaker. I covered my mouth. The man from Grandma Eleanor's letter. The craftsman Thomas had spent years researching. His own handwritten letter had been sitting inside my family's cabinet for more than 100 years. Thomas carefully turned another page, then another. Every few seconds, his expression became even more astonished. Finally, he whispered, "This changes everything." Daniel looked at him. What do you mean? Thomas closed the journal gently. I came here believing we might discover an important antique. He looked directly at me. I was wrong. What you've protected all these years is one of the most significant privately preserved historical collections I've ever seen. Before anyone could speak again, someone knocked loudly at the front door. 3 hard knocks. Daniel walked toward the entrance. He opened it. Rebecca stood there. Her eyes immediately moved past him, straight to the journals lying on the dining table, and the color drained from her face. Rebecca stood frozen in the doorway. Her eyes never left the journals. The room was so quiet that I could hear the old grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. Daniel stepped between her and the dining table. What are you doing here? She swallowed. I forgot some clothes. Neither of us believed that. Her suitcase wasn't in her hands. She wasn't looking toward the stairs. She was staring only at the journals. Thomas noticed it too. He calmly closed the top journal. Then he placed both hands on it. Rebecca finally spoke. So, I guess there really was something inside. Thomas answered before I could. There was. She looked at him. Is it valuable? I closed my eyes. That question again. Always the same question. Never. Is it important? Never. What is it? Only, is it valuable? Thomas smiled politely. It is historically significant. Rebecca frowned. That's not what I asked. I know. She folded her arms. So, how much is it worth? Thomas looked directly at her. I couldn't put a price on it. She laughed once. Everything has a price. Margaret Ellis quietly shook her head. No. Some things don't. Rebecca ignored her. She looked at Daniel. Tell me somebody's getting this appraised. Daniel answered calmly. We're protecting it first. She sighed dramatically. You people don't understand. I finally spoke. No, Rebecca. I think we understand perfectly. She looked at me. You've been asking the same question for days? How much is it worth? But not once have you asked why my grandmother protected it. Her expression tightened. I don't care why. I know. Those 2 words seemed to sting. Thomas carefully gathered the journals together. I recommend these documents remain together. Margaret nodded. They should never be separated. Daniel looked at them. What happens now? Thomas answered without hesitation. I'll contact 2 institutions. What institutions? The State Historical Archive. And the museum. Rebecca's head snapped toward him. Museum? Yes. They have climate-controlled preservation rooms. She laughed. So you're just giving everything away? No, Thomas replied. We're asking professionals to authenticate it. Rebecca turned to me. Dorothy, if this collection is worth millions, you'd be crazy not to sell it. For the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't hesitate. I won't sell it. She stared at me. You haven't even heard an offer? I don't need to. Her voice rose. Why not? Because my grandmother didn't protect this for 100 years so I could cash a check. The room fell silent. Rebecca looked at Daniel. Say something. He did. I'm proud of her. Rebecca shook her head. I don't recognize either of you anymore. Daniel answered quietly. I was just thinking the same thing. Those words hurt her. I could see it. But instead of reflecting, she became angry. So that's it. You've chosen your mother over your wife. I've chosen honesty. You've chosen history over money. No. I've chosen respect over greed. Rebecca grabbed her purse. Fine. When you realize what you're throwing away, don't expect me to feel sorry for you. She turned toward the front door, then suddenly stopped. She looked back at Thomas. One question. He waited. Have you told anyone else about this? His answer came immediately. No. She studied him carefully, almost as though she were deciding whether to believe him. Then she left. The front door closed. This time, no one moved for several seconds. Finally, Margaret spoke. She wasn't disappointed. I looked at her. What do you mean? She expected something. Thomas nodded slowly. I noticed that too. Daniel frowned. Expected what? Thomas leaned against the dining table. When she saw the journals, she wasn't surprised. I thought back. He was right. Rebecca hadn't gasped. She hadn't asked what they were. She had looked disappointed, as though she had expected something else. What were you expecting? I whispered. Thomas answered softly. Perhaps the same thing whoever stole the other cabinet expected. I looked at him. You mean money, jewels, a map, something easy to sell. He gently touched the leather journal. Instead, they found history. Margaret smiled. And history is priceless. Daniel looked at the wooden box that still sat unopened beside the journals. We haven't looked inside that. Thomas followed his gaze. No, we haven't. The room became quiet again. The small wooden box suddenly seemed much heavier than before. Margaret picked it up carefully. No lock, no keyhole. She turned it over. There. She pointed to a tiny carved oak leaf hidden underneath. Thomas smiled. The same craftsman's signature. She pressed gently. The lid lifted with a soft click. Inside, there was no gold, no diamonds, no money, only one folded envelope. Cream-colored, perfectly preserved. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were 5 simple words. For the next guardian only. My hands began to tremble. Thomas looked at me. Dorothy, I believe your grandmother wanted you to read this. I reached toward the envelope, then stopped. Somehow, it felt like Grandma Eleanor was standing beside me again, waiting patiently, just as she had when I was a little girl. I carefully broke the old wax seal. The letter unfolded without tearing. The first line made tears fill my eyes before I had even finished reading it. If you are reading this, then you kept your promise. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter. No one spoke. Thomas, Margaret, and Daniel simply waited. The first sentence blurred through my tears. If you are reading this, then you kept your promise. I wiped my eyes and continued. The handwriting was unmistakably my grandmother's. Elegant, steady, confident. I read aloud. My dear Dorothy, if these words have reached you, then I am gone, and you have carried a responsibility that I never fully explained. I paused. Daniel quietly reached for my hand. I squeezed his fingers before continuing. I wanted to tell you everything, many times, when you turned 18, when you married Michael, when Daniel was born. But every time I looked at you, I remembered the promise I made to my own mother. My voice became softer. She told me that every guardian must choose the next one not because they are the oldest, but because they understand the difference between ownership and stewardship. Thomas lowered his head. Margaret smiled faintly. I continued reading. You never treated the cabinet as furniture. You dusted it with care. You spoke to it with respect. You defended it when others laughed at it. That is why I chose you. A tear rolled down my cheek. For years I had wondered why. Now I finally knew. Grandma Eleanor had been watching me all along. The letter continued. What rests inside this cabinet was never meant to make anyone rich. Its purpose is to preserve truth. Money disappears, buildings fall, families argue, but truth can survive if someone protects it. Daniel whispered, She sounds just like you. I smiled through my tears. No, I sound like her. I kept reading. If one day someone offers you wealth in exchange for these papers, remember this. There will always be another person willing to buy history. There are very few willing to preserve it. The room fell silent. Even Thomas looked emotional. The final paragraph waited beneath my fingertips. I release you from the promise I carried, not because your duty is finished, but because you must choose your own path. Protect these records if you can. Share them if they can help others. But never let greed decide for you. Then beneath everything else, only 4 words. I always trusted you. Signed, Grandma Eleanor Brooks. I couldn't continue. I simply held the letter against my chest. For the first time since she died, I felt as though she had spoken directly to me. Margaret quietly wiped her own eyes. I never met your grandmother, but I wish I had. Thomas gently closed the journals. Dorothy, I think she understood history better than many historians. Daniel smiled. I know she understood people. We all laughed softly. The tension that had surrounded the cabinet for days suddenly felt different. The fear remained, but something stronger had taken its place. Purpose. Just then the doorbell rang. Daniel frowned. We aren't expecting anyone. He checked the security camera. It's Rebecca. I looked at Thomas. He nodded. The decision is yours. I took a deep breath. Let her in. Rebecca stepped inside slowly. She looked exhausted. Her makeup was gone. Her eyes were swollen from crying. She looked at Daniel first, then at me. I heard... She hesitated. I heard you opened it. We did. She noticed the journals stacked neatly beside the cabinet. I was wrong. No one answered. She continued. I kept thinking about everything you said. She looked at me. I don't think I ever understood why this mattered to you. I listened carefully. not because I completely trusted her, because I wanted to. She took another step. I grew up moving every few years. My parents sold everything whenever we needed money. Nothing stayed. No traditions. No heirlooms. No family stories. She looked down. So when I saw your cabinet, I only saw furniture. Her voice cracked. I didn't know what it meant. Daniel quietly asked, Then why did you keep asking how much it was worth? Rebecca closed her eyes. Because, she swallowed hard, we're in debt. Daniel looked stunned. What? I never told you. She began crying. The credit cards. The loan? The business investment? I kept believing I could fix everything before you found out. Daniel stared at her. How much? She whispered the number. His face lost all color. I finally understood. The panic, the rushed sale, the desperation. It didn't excuse what she had done, but it explained it. Rebecca looked at me again. I'm ashamed. I should have told you. I should have asked for help. Instead, I tried to solve my problems with something that wasn't mine. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, I walked toward her. She looked terrified. I don't know if I can trust you again. She nodded. I understand. But I believe people can make terrible decisions when they're afraid. Fresh tears rolled down her face. I'm sorry, Dorothy. This time, I believed she meant it, not because of her words, because she hadn't asked once about money. Not once. Daniel quietly moved beside her. We'll deal with the debt together. She looked up. You still want to help me? We're family. She covered her face and cried. Thomas gently picked up the journals. I think your grandmother would approve of this moment. I smiled. So do I. Then I looked once more at the old cabinet. For decades, I thought it had protected only papers. Now I understood. It had protected something far more valuable. It had protected our family from forgetting who we were. And somehow, after all these years, it had brought us back together. A year has passed since the day we opened my grandmother's cabinet. Sometimes I still walk into the dining room expecting to see everything exactly as it was. The old walnut wood, the glass doors, the tiny carved oak leaves, it is still there, exactly where Grandma Eleanor wanted it to remain. Only now, its story belongs to more than just our family. The journals were carefully restored. Every page was photographed, preserved, and cataloged. Thomas Whitmore kept his promise. Margaret Ellis kept hers. And I kept mine. The original journals never left our family's ownership. Instead, we agreed to lend them to the State Historical Archive so experts could preserve them while allowing historians to study copies. When Thomas first suggested that arrangement, he looked at me and smiled. Dorothy, history belongs to everyone. But responsibility still belongs to someone. I understood exactly what he meant. The cabinet stayed with me. It always will. Every few months, the museum borrows selected documents for special exhibitions. Each time they return them, I unlock the cabinet myself. Not because I distrust anyone, because Grandma Eleanor taught me that some responsibilities should never become routine. One Saturday morning, Daniel and I visited the museum together. A special exhibit had just opened. The entrance featured one simple title: Guardians of Memory. There were no flashing lights, no dramatic music, just photographs, letters, drawings, and the story of one family that chose preservation over profit. Thomas met us inside. He pointed toward the largest display. Behind protective glass rested a copy of Samuel Whitaker's letter. Visitors stood quietly reading every word. One elderly gentleman wiped tears from his eyes. A little girl asked her grandfather, "Why didn't they sell it?" He smiled. "Because some things are worth more than money." I looked away before anyone noticed my own tears. Grandma Eleanor would have loved hearing that answer. As we walked through the exhibit, people didn't talk about dollar amounts. They talked about craftsmanship, about history, about promises, about family, exactly as Grandma hoped. Daniel stood beside me. "You know what? I finally understand what Dad used to mean. When he said memories become more valuable with time." I smiled. He was right. He usually was. Daniel laughed. He'd never let us forget that. Neither would Michael. Later that afternoon, we stopped by the museum cafe. Thomas joined us with 2 cups of coffee. He looked happier than I had ever seen him. "I spent 20 years searching for Samuel Whitaker's missing records." He shook his head. "I never imagined they were sitting quietly inside someone's dining room." I laughed. "Neither did I." He became serious. "You changed something important." "How?" "Collectors like me often chase rare objects." He looked out the window. "You reminded me to look for the people who protected them." I didn't know what to say. He simply smiled. "So thank you." Months later, another unexpected surprise arrived. Rebecca asked if she could visit. She came alone. No arguments, no excuses. She carried a small box wrapped in brown paper. "I brought something." She placed it on the dining table. Inside was an old black and white photograph. I recognized myself immediately. I was 8 years old. Grandma Eleanor stood beside me. My tiny hand rested proudly on the cabinet. "I found it while cleaning the attic," Rebecca said. "I almost threw it away." She smiled sadly. "Then I remembered what you taught me." I looked at her. "You kept it." "I did. And—" She hesitated. "I've been volunteering at the local history center." That surprised me. They needed help organizing old family donations. She laughed softly. "I still don't know much about antiques, but now I understand why they matter." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for giving me another chance." Daniel wrapped one arm around her shoulders. "We're all still learning." Life wasn't suddenly perfect. We still argued sometimes. We still disagreed. But now we listened before judging. That changed everything. Last week, my grandson came to visit. He is 10 years old, curious about absolutely everything. He walked straight toward the cabinet. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why don't you keep the important papers in a bank?" I smiled. Then I opened one cabinet door. Not the hidden compartment, just the ordinary shelf. Inside sat family photographs. Michael's favorite coffee mug, Grandma Eleanor's sewing scissors, Daniel's first baseball glove. Objects worth almost nothing, yet priceless to us. I knelt beside him. "This cabinet doesn't protect paper. It protects stories." He thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "I think I understand." I smiled. "So did your great-great-grandmother." That evening, after everyone left, I sat alone in the dining room. The house was peaceful. Sunset painted warm, golden light across the cabinet. I gently rested my hand on its familiar wood, just as I had done thousands of times before. Except now, there were no unanswered questions, no hidden compartments, No mysteries left unsolved, only gratitude. I whispered the words I had wanted to say for years. Thank you, Grandma. Thank you for trusting me. In the quiet that followed, I almost imagined her voice again. Soft, gentle, certain. Some things are entrusted, not owned. I finally understood. She was never talking about the cabinet. She was talking about love, about family, about truth. And now, those things belong to the next generation, just as she always intended. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment and tell me what you would have done if you were in Dorothy's place. Have you ever inherited something that seemed ordinary, but carried priceless memories? I'd truly love to read your story. And if you enjoy heartfelt family stories like this one, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Until next time, take care of yourself and never underestimate the value of the memories we choose to protect.